Digging for water, he discovered an incredible treasure, the heart of an Apache widow revealed. Jake dropped his shovel into the dry earth with a dull thud, the parched land offering no resistance. Each desperate dig felt futile against the oppressive Arizona sun, a fire that bore down mercilessly on him. Hidden beneath the surface lay a heart-wrenching truth. The once thriving ranch that had been his father's pride was now suffocating under an unbearable weight, just like Jake himself. Digging for water wasn't merely about survival. It had become a symbol of his failing dreams, slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. As he stood there, staring at the unforgiving horizon, loneliness seeped into his bones. The townsfolk were preoccupied, too wrapped up in their own struggles to acknowledge his plight. The few conversations he'd used to share with neighbors were now mere echoes of the past. Trapped in isolation, Jake felt the tremendous pressure of towering bills and dwindling faith weighing heavily on his shoulders. He could hear his father's voice drift through his mind, cautioning him to uphold the family's legacy. But what legacy remained when the land turned its back, leaving him empty-handed? He continued to dig. The willow tree nearby stood tall and proud, its roots gripping the earth tightly. Frustration flooded Jake's veins as he struck something solid with his spade. Curious, he knelt down and began to excavate the area with renewed determination. His fingers trembled with anticipation, but when the dirt fell away to reveal ancient artifacts, excitement mingled with dread. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting the local authorities to emerge from the shadows. The implications of what he'd uncovered sent chills racing down his spine. Before he could truly process the reality of his find, Mary appeared, her presence as grounding as the land itself. An Apache widow with eyes that spoke volumes of sorrow and resilience, she reached out to help him. Together they brushed the soil away, revealing pieces of history buried deep beneath the surface, evidence of struggles long forgotten by the town. A camaraderie surged between them, grounded in a shared understanding of loss and injustice, yet rooted in that anxiety gnawing at Jake. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as they worked side by side, the thrill of discovery soon turned ominous. Mary voiced the fears that had lurked in the corners of Jake's mind. The artifacts could reveal truths about her husband's unjust suffering and the town's darker past. It fueled a fire in him, an urge to confront corruption lurking beneath a facade of civility. But what if standing for truth meant putting what little he had left at risk? Jake's hands trembled against the weight of his choices, doubts tangling like roots in his mind. He was caught between honoring his father's legacy and unearthing a painful past, knowing that exposing the buried truth could bring crashing consequences. As he chiseled at the dirt, despair coiled tighter around his heart. With each swing of the shovel, he could feel the clock ticking, an invisible countdown to a moment of reckoning. The thin line separating right from wrong narrowed, and Jake's throat tightened with every possibility weighing heavily upon him. With no good way forward, Jake faced an impossible choice. Would he entrench himself in the struggles of his own legacy, or take a stand for a haunting past that could destroy him? The weight of the town's shadows loomed larger than the parched land itself, waiting for him to decide before it swallowed them whole. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the desolate landscape as Jake and Mary paused to catch their breath. Their hands, caked with dirt, felt the collective weight of undisclosed histories. Yet Jake's mind remained adrift in a storm. How could he confront the painful truths they had unearthed? The dusty artifacts lay like an albatross around his neck, a reminder that the past still held power over the present. What if we just leave them? Jake murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Mary turned to him, her eyes filled with an understanding that went deeper than words. It's not just about what we leave behind, Jake. It's what we choose to confront. That history belongs to the people, just as much as it belongs to you and me. Her conviction ignited something inside him. Hadn't he yearned for purpose beyond mere survival? Somewhere beneath the facade of weakness, he sensed strength waiting to be unleashed, buried as deeply as the artifacts they had discovered. They knelt again, resuming their excavation as shadows stretched across the ground. Each shattered pottery shard they unearthed spoke volumes, narratives spilling forth that seemed to bind them tightly to the land and to each other. Jake had always felt like an outsider, a far cry from the rancher his father had been. With every historical treasure they revealed, he grappled momentarily with self-identity. Maybe this was a turning point. Uncovering stories of a people long marginalized could tether him to a greater purpose, one that extended beyond his father's legacy and into a realm of justice. But as the sun disappeared, the night revealed an uncomfortable truth. Fear, paranoia wrapped around him, gnawing through the excitement. What would happen if the town learned what they'd found? Would they try to erase it? Or even worse yet, make him pay for exposing the past? Maybe we should take this to the authorities, Jake suggested hesitantly, but Mary shook her head. Do you think they will help? No, they'll bury it deeper, just like they have buried my people's stories. Her words struck like cold steel against his heart. The weight of her distrust reflected a more comprehensive betrayal that he too had felt. The betrayal of a community more invested in silence than in truth. Realization dawned that he had a choice beyond self-preservation. He could find a voice within the noise of grim history. Then what do we do? Jake challenged, igniting a spark of determination even as doubts twisted in his gut. Help me give these artifacts their story, Mary replied, her quiet firmness filling the silent air between them. Only then can we heal. Only then can we hold those responsible for the injustices faced. Her resolve anchored him. Maybe he was ready to shed the weight of generational fear. As he cautiously realized the enormity of his decision, the discomfort that had nested deep inside began to morph. Could he really confront the truth? Jake's resolve strengthened, and he felt a flicker of courage fueled by the daunting uncertainty. They needed to document their findings and tell their shared story, showcasing the weighty history that could shape the future. Yet doing so would mean crossing paths with the very forces at play that might try to silence him. Just then, a shadow flitted across the landscape behind them, and instinctively, Jake's heart raced. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the dimming light, and Jake felt his defenses kick in. His commitment to uncovering the past was about to be put to the ultimate test. Would he embrace the shadows lurking behind him once and for all, or would fear hold him back? The moment of decision approached, and with every beat of his heart, the tension coiled tighter, begging for resolution. The figure stepped closer, revealing itself to be a tall, imposing man, silhouetted yet threatening against the dimming light. Jake's instinct screamed at him, forcing every muscle in his body to tense. Was this man a guardian of the secrets they were about to unearth, or a harbinger of danger? The discovery of the artifacts had awakened a restless energy within him, yet now, that energy curdled into a fear he couldn't shake. "Who are you?" Jake demanded, voice shaky but steady as he positioned himself protectively in front of Mary. The man chuckled, a harsh sound that scraped against the stillness of the night. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied, eyes glinting with a morbid curiosity. "What do you think you're playing at out here?" With each syllable, Jake felt the weight of Mariana's plea echo in his mind. This was the challenge he had to face, facing off against the shadows of truth that tormented the history he had ignored for too long. "We're uncovering history," Jake asserted. "The town deserves to know." "Does it?" The man stepped closer, and the moonlight caught the outline of a badge on his waist. "Or do you want to dig up a past better left buried?" Jake's heart raced as realization set in. This man wasn't just some passerby. He was a deputy, a symbol of the very authority that might seek to silence what they were recovering. Suddenly, the night spent in doubt felt light years away. He had the chance to take a stand, to carve his identity out of a shared struggle with Mary. "Those artifacts belong to a people who have been silenced for too long," Mary interjected, stepping beside Jake and matching the man's gaze. Her voice was fiery, igniting something within Jake. "We owe them the truth." The tension in the air thickened, wrapping around them like a noose. The deputy's face tightened but then assumed a mask of mockery, tainted with disbelief. "And you think some broken pots are going to change anything? This town has no use for your stories." With each word, Jake felt resentment swell within him. Perhaps it wasn't just the artifacts that had been buried over time. Maybe it was the spirit of those who had fought to be heard, just as he had been fighting against feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt since his father's death. "No," Jake replied, voice firming. "It's about understanding, about connecting with the past we've neglected." The deputy's expression soured. Jake could see it in the tightness around his jaw. "I'd suggest you two turn around and forget this nonsense. The history you're after has no place here." Rejecting the deputy's warning felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Fear gripped Jake again. Would he end up hurting not just himself, but Mary too? But beneath the fear lay a growing conviction that had been awakened alongside his discovery. "We're going to document this," Jake declared, resolving to hold on to both the artifacts and their significance. The idea of sharing these stories, of reshaping them into the narratives for the town's future, rushed through him like a wild river breaking through a dam. The man chuckled again, darker this time. "Then you better watch your backs. Not everyone appreciates a little digging into history." Jake's heart thrummed in response, flooding him with adrenaline. The time to face this head-on had arrived. He could feel the resolve bubbling within, the sense of purpose overtaking him, refusing to let it go. As the deputy turned to leave, the tension in the air shifted, pulsing with the promise of impending confrontation. Jake took a deep breath, recognizing this juncture as a threshold. It was now or never. "Let them try to bury the truth," he whispered to Mary, determination coloring his words. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." The night stretched before them like a blank canvas, filled with the chaotic energy of possibility. The stakes felt heavy, but within that weight lay the seeds of transformation. What would Jake's next choice be, as the shadows of his past and future intertwined? Suddenly, the urge to take action felt less like an obligation and more like a calling. But what awaited them was yet unknown, and the pull of their discoveries lay tantalizingly ahead, bold, unsettling, and inevitably tied to their fates. Jake and Mary stood rooted in place, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The deputy's departure left an unsettling silence, punctuated only by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Jake could feel the pulse of the town in his ears, each heartbeat a reminder of the legacy hidden within those artifacts. "We can't back down now, can we?" Mary asked, her hand brushing against Jake's arm, grounding him. He turned to her, seeing determination mirrored in her expression. She had ignited something within him, curling his fear into a coil of resolve. "No, we can't," he replied, his voice steady. "This is bigger than us." They decided to return to the excavation site, where the artifacts lay wrapped in yellowing cloth. With each step toward the forgotten pieces of history, Jake pondered what he would unearth, not just in physical terms, but within himself. He felt the weight of history tugging at him, urging him to confront his own buried truths. As they reached the clearing, the moonlight spilled over the dirt, highlighting the collection of shards and remnants. Jake knelt beside the countless pieces, each telling stories of struggles and survival, faceless until now. Gently, he uncovered a fragment. The texture of the clay felt oddly familiar, almost welcoming. "You think the deputy will come back?" Mary asked, kneeling beside him. "Maybe," Jake said contemplatively. "Or maybe it's time we show him there's more to this story." Taking a breath, he focused on what lay ahead. Mary was right. They had to be smart. Off the record and away from prying eyes, they could document the findings, create a narrative that breathed life back into the hollow parts of the town's history. Pacing a little, he realized that they had a unique chance not just to reclaim the past but to reshape their own identities amid it. Jake was no longer just a research assistant lingering in the shadows of his late father's legacy. Uncovering these artifacts gave him a purpose, an identity grounded in both the past and present. Jake picked up another shard, one engraved with intricate designs he'd never seen before. The deeper he looked into the contours, the more he felt a connection, a thread weaving through time from the artisans who crafted it to his hands, now cradling their work. This wasn't mere history anymore. It felt personal, like a mission. "Let's document them right now." He turned to Mary with newfound intensity. "Let's record their stories, their meanings." Together they set up a makeshift workspace, arranging the artifacts in a manner that told a cohesive story. Jake sketched notes, detailing not only the shapes and inscriptions, but feeling out the narratives behind each piece, imagining the people who once held them. A few fragments couldn't help but resonate with his own struggles, loss, resilience, and a yearning to be recognized. As they worked, Jake felt the burden of his fears begin to lift, replaced with an exhilarating sense of agency. It was still there, the shadow of self-doubt, lurking at the edges of his consciousness. But this time, it was dwarfed by an emergent confidence. He found the courage to confront the darker aspects of himself, his father's legacy of unfulfilled potential, the haunting questions of worthiness that had followed him for years. Every hour spent digging into the past was fuel to ignite his future. But amidst this blossoming conviction, the weight of external pressure loomed larger than before. The threat of the deputy, the possible repercussions, still loomed in his mind like a storm cloud on the horizon. Would he find the strength to face that confrontation head-on, knowing every discovery pushed him further into the eye of the storm? "I think we've documented enough for today," Mary said, glancing up from her notes. "We should think about our next steps." Jake nodded, the thrill of possibilities washing over him, invigorating yet daunting. It was more than just a local mystery now. It felt personal, echoing the very fabric of who he was. Before they could leave, a sudden rustling in the underbrush sent a thrill of fear down Jake's spine. Someone was out there, watching. He couldn't shake the feeling that their pursuit would soon collide with the reality of their opposition. Would they be prepared for the confrontation that loomed ahead? Or would the shadows threaten to swallow the light they were struggling to uncover? The night stretched out before them, fraught with possibilities, both exhilarating and fearsome. The question lingered between them. What would be revealed next, and at what cost? Jake's heart raced, the chilling rustle transforming from background noise into a pulse of danger that echoed in the stillness of the night. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist around him, urging him to retreat even as his feet remained anchored to the damp earth. This was not just a moment, it was a catalyst. "Did you hear that?" Mary whispered, her voice betraying a mix of intrigue and trepidation. "Yeah," Jake managed to reply, his mind racing. The deputy's figure loomed in his thoughts, but more pressing was the idea that they were on the brink of something much larger than just themselves. He took a measured breath, willing his instincts to return to focus. "Let's just keep documenting," he suggested, each word steadying him. "If they want to confront us, they'll have to find more than shadows." Jake's hands moved mechanically at first, but the assembly of artifacts now felt sacred. Each piece came alive with newfound significance, like a bridge between what was lost and the potential of what could emerge. He leaned over the markings on a fragment, an intricate swirl that might signify a story of love or sacrifice, an echo of resilience. With a renewed sense of purpose, he urged Mary to share her insights on the artifact's meanings. "What do you think these shapes tell us?" he asked, not just for her input, but as a way to solidify his resolve. "Some look ceremonial," she replied, pointing to a bulging piece marked with faded patterns. "I almost feel like they were part of rituals, maybe something to connect the living with the spirits." Her voice punctuated the air, and Jake found himself feeling that connection too. They were bestowed with an indirect invitation to inspire dialogue, not only between themselves and the past, but more so with the present, a dialogue that could lead to understanding, healing, and empowerment. He immersed himself deeper, jotting down notes infused with meaning, envisioning the tales these artifacts could tell, and the lives they could change. Yet every stroke of his pencil was laced with the tension of potential confrontation. What would he say if the deputy appeared? Would he defend their mission or allow fear to dictate his choices? The reality of it all began to pierce through his bravado. He had to mentally prepare for what lay ahead, a test not just of his findings, but of his character. "We need to protect this," he said suddenly, voicing an instinct. "Every artifact, every story, it's ours to tell." Mary turned to him, her brow furrowed. What if it means standing up to the deputy? What if he takes it all away? The question hung heavy in the air, each word reverberating in Jake's mind. Did he have the mettle to challenge authority, especially after being overshadowed for so long? But as he knelt in the moonlight, surrounded by remnants of those who had already fought their battles, a flicker of defiance sparked within him. I do have to stand up, he said with a quiet ferocity. Not just for this, but for us, for my own voice. Mary smiled softly, a light breaking through their uncertainty. They continued to work side by side, the urgency of the moment propelling them forward, their minds weaving together the fragile narratives they were piecing back together. As the night advanced, so too did a sense of looming inevitability. There was power in their unity, and in that power, Jake began to discover the courage he never knew lay dormant within him. The balance was delicate. He had to remain vigilant, ready for the inevitable confrontation that he could sense was drawing near. Just as they finalized their notes and prepared to leave, Jake caught sight of a figure in the distance, half shrouded in darkness. His heart dropped into his stomach, realization dawning. This was no mere shadow. Could it be the deputy, ready to enforce silence where there could be a voice? Mary, he whispered urgently, pointing toward the figure, we might not be alone after all. As the figure's silhouette shifted, the weight of the moment intensified. Jake was faced with a choice. Would he retreat into fear, or step forward and confront the challenge head-on? The silence of the night closed in around them. Their next moves faded to define not just their investigation, but their identities. Would they stand resolute or be swept away in the tide of intimidation? Jake's pulse quickened, an instinctual response not just to the apparition lurking in the darkness, but also to the undeniable call of his own resolve. He turned his focus away from the figure and back to the artifacts. This moment wasn't just about preservation, it was about purpose, about the narrative that needed to be told. He felt the weight of the objects around him, the stories they housed, untold tales of struggle, resilience, and strength. Maybe we can use this, he thought, scanning the scattered artifacts quickly. If the deputy wants to silence us, we can make him listen. It was a bold idea, perhaps naive, but it ignited something deep within him. Opening his notebook, he began to write furiously, his thoughts crystallizing into a plan. The artifacts weren't merely relics, they were the embodiment of a legacy that deserved recognition. Jake, Mary's voice broke through his intensity, a note of urgency creeping in. What if he's here for us? The question hung like fog. Would they be discovered? He contemplated the risk, his mind racing with scenarios, but then he glanced at the artifacts. A dozen voices crying out for acknowledgement. If we're to be brave, now is the time, he declared, steel threading through his voice. She hesitated, eyes searching his face. Seeing the determination etched there, she nodded, encouraged but still wary. Let's move slowly, keep our eyes peeled. But if he sees us... Her sentence trailed off, and Jake felt the weight of her concern merge with his own. Together, they advanced cautiously, crouching low among the artifacts while stealing glances toward the looming figure. A shiver of uncertainty snaked down Jake's spine. He had spent his life as a passive observer, waiting for opportunities rather than creating them. But now, as they embarked on this investigation that required courage and clarity, a realization began to surface. Waiting was no longer an option. What if this isn't just a local issue? He pondered aloud. What if what we uncover resonates beyond just this town? What if history has a wider audience who deserves to hear the truth? Mary's eyes widened. You mean, publish it? Exactly. At every stage of this process, we've been quiet about the impact of these artifacts, the stories that could reshape perspectives, histories overlooked. His conviction felt like a flame igniting in the pit of his stomach. But we must confront the deputy and protect these artifacts first. As if on cue, the figure shifted again, and Jake's heart raced. He couldn't run. Retreat was no longer an option. He drew together his thoughts and took a step forward. The delicate balance between fear and resolve teetered on the edge of his decision. I won't let fear define me, he whispered, his voice barely reaching Mary. We need to show authority that we're serious, but we need a strategy. We document everything for evidence. This is far bigger than just us or this site. Mary smiled, and for a fleeting moment, their shared resolve chased away their fear. Pausing, she added, we could rally some supporters too, those who care about the truth. This isn't just our struggle, it's theirs as well. Bolstered by the prospect of collaboration, Jake's internal narrative shifted. His past was filled with hesitations, but the looming confrontation demanded he solidify his beliefs into actionable steps. He realized that he possessed more than knowledge. He now had purpose, and that would be the foundation upon which he would stand. Suddenly, the figure stepped into clearer view. Jake's stomach tightened as the light from a distant lamp illuminated the unmistakable badge on the figure's chest. It was the deputy. With shoulders squared, Jake felt the simmering determination boil to the surface. This was the moment where his choices would prove his character. "Ready?" he asked Mary, his voice steadier than he felt. "Ready," she replied, echoing his sentiment. They faced the deputy together, fueled by the burgeoning recognition of their mission. But as they prepared to confront authority, Jake couldn't shake the lingering doubt. Were they truly ready to defend not just their findings, but their newfound sense of purpose? What would the deputy say? The moment had arrived. They would no longer be shadows in the night. Would their emerging voices pierce through the veil of silence and resistance? Or would they be just another whisper lost in the darkness? The deputy stood before them, a looming figure awash in the shadows, his presence both intimidating and authoritative. He surveyed the room with narrowed eyes, as if he could sense the tremors of rebellion simmering beneath Jake's calm facade. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to determine that this meeting would be different. There would be no backpedaling. "Good evening, deputies," Jake began, his voice unexpectedly steady. "We've come across something important here, important for both the town and the wider community." The deputy crossed his arms, skepticism radiating from his taut frame. "I hope this doesn't involve the heritage site," he replied, voice dripping with condescension. "You know the law." Mary shot a warning glance at Jake, but he steeled himself, refusing to be cowed. "It does involve the heritage site. These artifacts are part of a larger narrative, stories that deserve to be shared, truths that can benefit everyone, not just a few." "Benefit, huh? And what's in it for you two?" The deputy's tone was sharp, defensive. Jake understood this was the moment to push forward not just for himself, but for the countless stories buried in the artifacts around them. "Perhaps the benefit lies in the preservation of history," Jake retorted, tapping into the changing conviction deep within him. He could feel the past, the lives intertwined around these artifacts, pressing against him, urging him to press on. At that moment, Mary stepped closer, lending her voice to his cause. "We're not here to threaten you or your office. We believe that acknowledging these artifacts could foster a stronger community connection, perhaps even reconciliation with those who feel overlooked by our history." The deputy stiffened, but remained silent. Jake sensed an opening, and the mix of urgency and purpose flooded his veins. "We've documented everything we've found. There's a story here that ties back generations, a story of struggle and survival that hasn't been told. We're simply asking for a chance to share it." Suspicion danced across the deputy's face, but also a hint of intrigue. Was this the path to leverage change? As Jake held the deputy's gaze, he felt the stirrings of empowerment, a transformation taking root. "What's the plan, then?" the deputy finally replied, his voice less dismissive. "You think you can just waltz in with your notebook and declare some grand truth?" Jake's determination sharpened. "No, we don't want to waltz. This is serious work." He glanced momentarily at the artifacts as if they could infuse him with courage. "We want to collaborate, to do this the right way. We're willing to work with you, open the dialogue instead of letting it decay unnoticed." He watched a flicker of contemplation cross the deputy's expression, but it quickly vanished, leaving a steely resolve. "And if that dialogue means dismantling what we've built here?" "Or building something better," Mary interjected, her voice firm. "Change doesn't come without a struggle, but it's a struggle we owe to those who came before us." Silence enveloped them. Jake felt the room charged with tension, the stakes rising. This confrontation, one he had always feared, now felt like a crucible in which he could reshape his identity. He could no longer be just a passive observer. He had the power to influence the unfolding story, to discover and reveal truths that mattered. But that truth came with risks, challenges, and the potential for pushback. "Consider this a proposal," Jake finally said, summoning every ounce of his courage. "Let us show you what we've uncovered. Let's explore the potential together." The deputy regarded them both, the weight of decision pressing heavily upon him. Jake's pulse raced with apprehension, unsure if this moment would forge a pathway forward or lock them into silence once more. As the deputy's silence stretched into a pregnant pause, Jake realized that they were at the threshold of a transformative moment, not just for the artifacts or the town, but for himself. Would he walk through this door of opportunity, or would he falter? The deputy took a breath, the tension palpable. Would he support their vision, or drive them back into the shadows? Jake's mind raced with possibilities, each more fraught with implications than the last. What would become of the stories waiting to be told? The moment hung in the air like a breath held for too long, a turning point in both their lives. As the unspoken words lingered precariously, Jake understood. This was not just a challenge, it was the beginning of his evolution. Would he rise to the occasion, or remain bound to his past? A thought flickered in the back of his mind, compelling and urgent. What would he truly uncover about himself in this struggle? The answer danced just out of reach, but one thing was certain. This was the pivotal moment for them all. Time dragged as they waited for the deputy to respond, each second thickening the air. Jake's thoughts hurled themselves through an array of emotions, fear, hope, and a deepening resolve. This wasn't just about the artifacts, it was also about his own journey. If the deputy could see the value in their mission, maybe Jake could find a clearer path forward in his life. Finally, the deputy leaned forward, his skepticism giving way to something more subtle, curiosity, or perhaps a hint of respect. "All right, let's say I'm intrigued. You've piqued my interest. What's your next step?" Jake's heart raced at the opportunity to finally contribute to something larger. "We'll organize our findings and present them. It's imperative to highlight the context behind each artifact, the lives intertwined with their histories. We can show how stories of hardship and resilience can resonate with our present." Each word was like a stone laid on a path he was beginning to carve out for himself. "Put together your presentation," the deputy said, his tone flat but his eyes sharper now. "You can come back in a week, but understand this. I'll be watching. You mess with the past, and there will be consequences." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of that warning. He had stepped into a world where every decision could ripple outward, shaping not just narratives but reputations. With the deputy's eyes scrutinizing him, he felt the pressure to rise, not just for himself, but for the stories he aimed to tell. As they left the meeting, adrenaline still coursing through him, Jake could feel Mary's gaze on him, an unspoken communication of shared purpose. "You did well," she said softly, her reassurance grounding him. "I'm not sure what will happen next," Jake admitted, grappling with the enormity of what they were undertaking. "What if it backfires? What if the artifacts aren't accepted?" Mary's expression shifted, her confidence unfaltering. "Change is never easy, and it rarely comes without pushback. But if we can unveil their significance, maybe we'll create a new understanding, both for the past and for ourselves." Jake considered her words, each syllable laced with wisdom gained from her experiences. Planning how they would present would require more than just facts. It needed depth, respect for the history they were revealing. "Let's start organizing our findings," he said, his voice firming with resolution. "Every piece tells a story. Let's make sure we honor that narrative." He felt a rush of determination as he considered the scope of their task. They had to dig deeper than surface-level facts. Each artifact held within it the weight of memories yearning to be acknowledged. That evening, in the quiet of his home, with papers and photographs strewn across the table, Jake began compiling notes. Each artifact sparked memories of conversations he'd had and research he'd done, stitching together a tapestry of culture that had long been overlooked. Yet as he pored over the materials, something gnawed at him, a growing realization about his motivations. Was he doing this for recognition? To expose the past? Or was it something deeper? A desperate need to affirm his own identity through the stories of others. Hours passed, and the line between his purpose and his fears blurred. The world felt heavy with expectation. Jake's sense of self felt like a foundation upon which he was building something new, fragile yet promising. As he carefully approached a particularly intriguing artifact, he paused, contemplating whether it would lead him to more personal revelations. Suddenly he realized this journey was about more than uncovering histories. It was an opportunity to confront his own narrative. As he considered what lay ahead, one thought flashed vivid in his mind. What if the truth he sought was not just in the artifacts, but within himself? Jake's heart surged with uncertainty and excitement as he ventured further into his research, ready to harness the power of the stories waiting to be revealed. What he would discover next promised to be as profound as the heritage they were unearthed. Would he come to terms with his own past while unearthing the truths of others? The question hung in the air, bold and unyielding, as a new determination took root within him. Jake dedicated himself to the task at hand, propelled by an urgent need not only to honor the history of the artifacts, but also to explore the uncharted territories of his own psyche. Each evening bled into dawn as he found himself engrossed in meticulous research, unveiling layers of context behind every item. His study became a sanctuary where history and personal reflection collided fiercely. The artifacts began to speak to him, weaving threads of connection between their pasts and his present. One evening, he found a weathered photograph of an Apache widow, her face etched with sorrow and strength. The image stirred something deep within him, trapping him in a vortex of introspection. This woman's story transcended time, reminding Jake of the fragility and resilience of the human spirit. She faced her adversities with a grace that he envied. The juxtaposition of her struggles against his own fears ignited a burning desire to understand her journey. What had she endured? What sacrifices had she made? The thought propelled Jake into a deeper quest, not only to represent her life in a presentation, but to confront his own. He scribbled notes about her life, building connections between her experiences and those around him. Each insight sent electric currents through his consciousness, sparking conversations with Mary about human resilience and cultural heritage. Over coffee one afternoon, he shared his thoughts with her. "It's amazing how much we can learn from the struggles of those who've passed," he said. "This woman's life, it's filled with untold lessons about survival." "Yes," Mary replied, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "It's about acknowledging their pain and learning from their survival. Every story reveals a piece of ourselves too." But a disquieting sense of responsibility burdened Jake. He questioned whether he was adequate for the weight of this task, whether he could extract a meaningful narrative from the shards of history. Would the deputy's critical gaze be satisfied? What if he misrepresented the very voices he sought to amplify? As days wore on, doubt began to gnaw at him, intertwining with his resolve. The effort to unearth the truth required not just knowledge but profound fortitude. Jake wrestled with his insecurities, contemplating whether this project was truly a tribute to those who came before him, or merely a quest for personal validation. Despite the uncertainty circling in his mind, he faced a pivotal choice. Should he approach this presentation as a meticulous historian, or lean into the raw emotional truths that echoed in his mind? It felt like a redirection of his instincts. The artifacts begged for authenticity beyond figures or theories. They yearned for the heartbeat of humanity behind every brushstroke and stitch. On the night prior to their meeting with the deputy, Jake felt an electric anticipation mixed with trepidation. He leaned against his desk, encircled by notes, photographs, and timelines, catching his breath. Taking a moment to center himself, he confronted his motives in the dim light casting shadows on his cluttered workspace. Was he ready to expose his vulnerabilities along with the artifacts? The world seemed to blend into silence as he wrestled with the reality of sharing part of his own journey intertwined with those lost to time. As he delved deeper into the widow's narrative, hints of his own fears emerged, his own isolation, a yearning for connection, and questions of identity that felt unsettlingly unresolved. Jake stood, with newfound clarity guiding him forward. He wouldn't just present artifacts, he would present humanity. He would weave his quest with hers, forging a narrative that transcended the time between them and invited the deputy, and ultimately the world, to witness the formidable bond of shared human experience. Yet as he prepared his final notes, a sudden thought struck, intertwining excitement with dread. Would he be prepared for the challenges that would arise when he unspooled the truth he had uncovered? The dawn would reveal more than a presentation. It would set the stage for transformation, and Jake would soon find himself at the crossroads of revelation. The morning sun crested the horizon, casting golden rays over the once dormant landscape. Jake stood in front of the mirror, practicing his presentation, his heart pounding with a blend of anticipation and trepidation. He had spent days meticulously crafting a narrative that intertwined the artifact's stories with his own transformation. an echo of resilience that he had long sought to discover within himself. Today was not just a presentation, it was a declaration. The sunlit day outside felt like a heralding of his newfound resolve, the scent of possibilities permeating the air around him. He envisioned the widow whose story he had come to cherish, her strength becoming a guiding force in his own journey. He had transcended the role of a passive observer. He was a catalyst ready to ignite a new understanding. As he gathered his notes, each page felt heavy with meaning, rich with the narratives of survival, pain, and the fight for recognition. Jake thought of Mary, who had stood by him through this tumultuous journey. They had forged a partnership grounded in mutual respect and a shared commitment to uncovering the truth of their intertwined histories. Today, he would not only stand for the artifacts found, but also for every voice that had been silenced for too long. Entering the town hall, the space felt larger than life, yet the atmosphere was thick with skepticism. The deputy was already seated, arms crossed, his demeanor suggesting a readiness for confrontation. Jake felt those familiar pangs of doubt resurface but shook them off, remembering the resilience he had uncovered. This was his moment, and the time for self-doubt had passed. "Good morning, everyone," Jake began, projecting a calm but firm voice. He looked directly at the deputy, seeking to disarm the skepticism that had shadowed their previous encounter. "Today, we are here not just to present artifacts, but to share the stories underlying them, stories that connect us all." With that, he launched into his presentation, detailing the journey of each artifact, weaving in narratives that highlighted their significance within the Apache community and beyond. He rooted their stories in fundamental human experiences: struggle, love, sacrifice, and perseverance. Each slide illuminated not only the artifacts, but also the stories of individuals who had once thrived amidst their own challenges, much like he had. The deputy's expression shifted, intrigue creeping into his furrowed brow as Jake relentlessly tied narratives of the past to the present. He saw transformation flicker in the room, a ripple of recognition among the audience that perhaps what had been buried was valuable, that history, both painful and potent, could be a bridge to understanding. As Jake approached the closing of his presentation, the crowd was visibly moved. "Our stories allow us to identify not only with each other, but with our shared humanity," he asserted. "In honoring those who have come before us, we embrace an opportunity to rewrite the future. The artifacts we've uncovered are more than objects. They are testimonies to the resilience of a people, an illuminating reminder that understanding our past can guide us forward together." A hushed silence enveloped the room. Jake's heart raced. He had crossed a threshold, an alignment of purpose that felt overwhelmingly fulfilling. The deputy, initially hardened, seemed to soften, and the room pulsed with a palpable energy of possibility. "Thank you, Jake," the deputy finally spoke up, breaking the lengthening stillness. "It's clear you've put a lot of thought and work into this. I can appreciate the importance of these histories." The response landed heavier than Jake expected, his heart lightening as hope seeped into the collective consciousness of the gathering. They were not merely witnesses to artifacts, they were participants in a larger, transformative narrative. Recognition had materialized, and the dialogue was now open. Jake walked out of town hall, sensations of triumph flooding through him. He felt liberated, no longer shackled by self-doubt or the shadows of the past. He had discovered not only a burgeoning legacy for the artifacts, but also a clearer sense of himself in the world. Side by side with Mary, he turned to her, a smile breaking across his face. "We did it. Together." "Yes," she replied, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "This is just the beginning." Jake inhaled deeply, sustained by their shared accomplishment. The weight of history had transformed into the promise of possibility. The journey had illuminated the truth that he was not just an heir to a legacy, but an active participant in crafting a new narrative for the future, one anchored in respect, understanding, and collective growth. With an unyielding spirit, he felt ready to embrace the path ahead, fueled by an unwavering commitment to honor the stories of the past while forging meaningful connections for tomorrow. He had conquered fear, reclaimed agency, and awakened a sense of purpose that transcended his initial struggles. The world felt alive with new experiences waiting to unfold, past and present intertwined in a dance of healing and transformation. He had achieved the growth he sought. He had transformed not only for himself, but for the echoes of history that would continue to resonate through generations. As he and Mary walked into the sprawling Arizona landscape, the sun bathed them in warmth, a symbol of brighter days ahead. And as the narrative of Jake's life continued to unfold, one truth lingered. He would never stop digging for those treasures that revealed the heart of humanity nestled within the layers of his experience. Now you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for these transformative narratives. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake's journey. What did you resonate with the most? And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the inspiration. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.